Something happened. Not in the future, not eventually, not someday after you have generated enough faith or prayed enough prayers or waited long enough. Something happened right now, while you were living your ordinary day, while the silence felt permanent. Two people who know the truth about your situation. Two people who were present for the moments that defined everything, who witnessed what was done to you and what was said about you and what was taken from you, are no longer silent. One of them just broke, and chosen one. I need you to stop whatever you were doing when you found this message, because the breaking was not accidental. It was not a coincidence that you stumbled across this right now. It was not even a human decision made in isolation, by someone who woke up this morning and randomly chose honesty. It was orchestrated, deliberately, precisely, on schedule, by the same God who sat with you through every silent morning of the season that preceded this moment. Every night you questioned whether anyone would ever know. Every moment you chose trust over reaction. He was not absent while you waited. He was working. And what he was working toward just broke the surface. If you are listening to this right now, if this message found you in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, or a sleepless night, or a quiet moment between carrying everything you have been carrying, I need you to hear something before we go one step further. You did not stumble onto this. Not the algorithm, not chance, not coincidence. You were brought here at this exact moment, not after the breakthrough, not when it would feel more comfortable to receive this news. Right now, that while it is happening, God did not arrange for you to find this message after the work was done and the result was obvious and the vindication was already visible. He arranged for you to be here while the work is in motion. You are watching it unfold in real time. Chosen one, the fact that you are here right now is itself the first evidence of what this message is about. God is arranging things. He arranged the witness. He arranged this message. He arranged this moment. And what you do with the next 40 minutes, how you choose to receive what He is showing you, may be the most significant spiritual decision of this entire season. By the time this message is complete, you are going to understand 3 things that will change how you see every single day of the season you have been walking through. First, you are going to understand why the injustice lasted as long as it did. Not to make peace with the length, but because when you understand the reason, the waiting stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like preparation. Second, you are going to see the specific mechanism God uses to preserve and release truth. It is not mystical, it is not random. It is a system He built into the foundation of reality itself. And once you see it, you will recognize it working in your life right now. Third, you are going to receive one assignment, not 5, not a list of spiritual disciplines. One thing. The one posture that positions you to receive everything that is already moving toward you. Stay with me, because what comes next does not just change how you feel about your situation, it changes how you understand the last year, or 2 years, or 5 years of your life. It answers the question you have been afraid to ask, and it does it not with theory, but with something that is already happening. Before we talk about what God is doing, I want to stay here for a moment, right here, where you actually are, not where faith says you need to get to, not where the sermon tells you should be, not the polished version of yourself you present when someone asks how you are doing. Here, something was done to you that was not right. Something was said about you that was not true. A narrative was constructed, carefully, deliberately, by someone who understood exactly how to make it stick. And it left you defined by something you did not do, accused of something you are not, carrying a version of yourself that is not you. And the people who were present, the ones who saw what actually happened, chose silence. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of loyalty to the wrong person, maybe because speaking the truth would have cost them a relationship or a position or a comfort they were not prepared to surrender. And so they stayed quiet. And you have been living in the weight of that quiet, day after day. Chosen one, I am not going to open this message by asking you to minimize what you are carrying. What you are carrying is real. The weight of being wrongly defined is one of the heaviest things a person can hold. Heavier than failure, heavier than loss, because failure and loss are honest. But being wrongly defined is a weight that does not belong to you, and yet you have been the one carrying it. God saw every single day of that, every single one. But here is what I need you to understand about the universe God built. He did not simply create a world with good intentions toward the righteous. He built reality with a specific law embedded in its foundation, a law as reliable as gravity, as inevitable as the rising of the sun, as certain as the turning of the seasons. Luke chapter 8 verse 17 says this, "Nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light." Read that again slowly. Nothing. Not some things, not the obvious things, not the easy to discover things. Nothing. Every concealment has an expiration date. Every buried truth has a resurrection appointment. Every carefully constructed narrative, built on something false, carries within itself the seed of its own exposure. Because the universe was not built to sustain lies permanently, God did not just promise He would eventually bring things to light. He designed reality itself with the impossibility of permanent concealment. This is not a contingent promise. It is not something that only applies if you pray hard enough or believe strong enough or deserve it sufficiently. It is a description of how existence operates. The law of hidden things is as reliable as gravity, and your situation is subject to it. Not if, not maybe, not someday if God decides to intervene. Your situation, the truth about what happened, what was done, what was said, what was taken, is subject to the same law that governs all hidden things in the universe God built. It is already working. You do not need to force it. It is working. And here is what this law means for the truth about your situation. The real truth, the full truth, the truth that the false narrative was constructed to bury. It is hidden, but it is hidden in a universe where nothing hidden stays hidden. It does not matter how carefully it was buried. It does not matter how many people agreed to keep it quiet. It does not matter how long it has been buried. It does not matter how powerful the people who want it buried are. The law does not negotiate with power. The law does not honor agreements of silence. The law does not grant extensions based on how committed people are to keeping a secret. The law applies. And here is the part that changes everything about your assignment in this season. This law does not need your help to work. Chosen one, let that land. It does not require you to force the truth to the surface. It does not require you to fight the narrative. It does not require you to build a case or gather evidence or convince the people around you. The law works without your intervention. Your continuous effort to manage the exposure of the truth is not just unnecessary. In some cases, it has been slowing down what God was already doing. Because when you step in to force what the law was already going to accomplish, you put yourself back in a position of management. And management is exhausting. And the version of you that is managing is the version that is too tired to stand in position when the breakthrough arrives. Your job is not to expose the hidden thing. Your job is to stay positioned while the Lord does what the Lord does. And here is how God almost always applies the law of hidden things in a human situation. not through dramatic supernatural intervention that bypasses human will, not through documents that surface at convenient moments, not through institutions deciding to do the right thing, through people, specifically through people who were present. People who heard what was said when the room was small and the circle was tight and no one was expecting the moment to matter. People who saw what was done before the narrative was constructed to cover it. People who carry the knowledge of what actually happened, not as evidence they assembled, but as memory they cannot escape. These people have a name. In the economy of heaven, they are called witnesses, and your situation has them, not one. 2. God did not leave your situation to chance. He did not hope that somehow the truth would accidentally surface without anyone to confirm it. He preserved people. He held their knowledge intact. He worked on their conscience, quietly, consistently, over the length of the entire season you have been waiting through. He created conditions internally, a restlessness, a conviction, a growing inability to hold what they know, that brought them to exactly this point. And for one of them, the internal pressure reached a threshold this morning that it had not reached before, and they broke. The silence they had been holding, God made it unbearable, and that is how the law of hidden things works, not through power, through people who finally could not stay quiet. C.S. Lewis was not just a theologian. He was a man who suffered deeply, honestly, without the protection of spiritual performance. When his wife, Joy Davidman, died after only 4 years of marriage, after a love he had never expected to find and could not imagine losing, Lewis did not retreat into comfortable theology. He wrote it all down, not the polished version, not the version designed to encourage others, the raw version, the version where God feels like a locked door, where prayer feels like silence echoing back, where the faith he had built his entire career defending suddenly felt like it was made of paper. He called it A Grief Observed, and if you have never read it, you should, because it is the most honest account of what it feels like when the God you trust goes quiet in the season you need him most. But that was not the only thing Lewis wrote about suffering. Before Joy died, before his own season of unbearable loss, Lewis wrote a theological work called The Problem of Pain. He was trying to answer a question that has troubled every thinking person of faith. If God is good and God is powerful, why does he allow pain? And the answer he arrived at was not the answer most people expect. It was not about building character. It was not about teaching patience. It was about function, about what pain actually does. Not to the person suffering, but to the people watching. And chosen one, what Lewis discovered, applies directly to what has been happening with the witnesses in your situation for longer than you realize. Lewis wrote this: God whispers to us in our pleasures, he speaks in our conscience, but he shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Long pause. Read that slowly. God whispers in the good seasons. When life is comfortable and things are working and the blessings are visible, God speaks softly, because in those seasons, people are mostly paying attention. But in pain, he shouts, not quietly, not gently, with a megaphone. Now, here is what most people assume when they read that quote. They assume Lewis means that God shouts at the person who is suffering, that pain is how God gets your attention, that the megaphone is aimed inward. But chosen one, read it again. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world, not a deaf individual. A deaf world, the people around the person in pain, the people who witnessed what happened, the people who saw the injustice and looked away, the people whose conscience went quiet when the truth needed a voice. God was not using your pain to reach you. You were already paying attention. He was using your suffering as the volume on a message aimed at the people who are not. The specific, visible, undeniable suffering you walk through, the kind that could not be hidden or minimized or explained away, disturbed something in the witnesses, something they could not name, something they could not put down, something that has been getting louder, not quieter, over the length of the season, until this morning, when one of them could no longer carry what they were holding. God shouts through pain, and what he was shouting through yours was aimed directly at the person who just broke. Here is what happened in the conscience of the witness who just broke. Every time they thought about what they knew, every time the memory surfaced of what they saw and what they heard and what they chose not to say, the discomfort grew. Slowly at first, a quiet nudge, a moment of unease that passed quickly, then louder, a restlessness that would not resolve, a sense that the silence was costing them something they had not budgeted for. Then louder still, a point where staying quiet began to feel more painful than speaking. And this morning, they reached the threshold, and they spoke. Chosen one, this is not a coincidence of human conscience. This is the megaphone. God whispered through your pain. Then he spoke. Then he shouted. And the deaf world around your situation started to wake up. Not because you forced it, not because you built a case or demanded they speak, not because you engineered any outcome, because you went through what you went through. And it was visible, and it disturbed something. And God was working on the witnesses while you were busy holding your position. What Lewis understood from his own season, what he learnt in the aftermath of Joy's death, in the grief he could not resolve, is that God does not waste pain, not yours, not the pain of the person who witnessed your suffering and could not look away. Every ounce of it had a function, and part of that function, the part you could not see while you were in it, was preparing the person who just broke. Type "they cracked" in the comments right now if this is beginning to make sense of everything you have walked through. If you are starting to see that what felt like God's absence was actually God's precision. Psalm 37 verse 6 says this, "He will make your righteousness shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun." I want you to sit with the specific imagery God chose in that verse. Not a lamp, not a candle, not a torch you have to carry and protect from the wind, the dawn. And the noonday sun, these are not suggestions. These are not contingent outcomes. These are not promises that require a specific level of performance from you to activate. These are natural inevitabilities built into the rhythm of creation. God did not compare your vindication to a decision someone might make. He did not compare it to a legal case that could go either way. He did not say, "Your righteousness will shine if the right people speak, or if the circumstances align, or if you handle this season correctly." He compared your vindication to the dawn. And the dawn does not ask permission. The darkness does not get a vote. The night does not negotiate with the morning. The people who prefer the dark cannot hold back the rising of the sun. The dawn comes because that is what dawn does. It is not a question of whether, it is only ever a question of when. And chosen one, that is the promise sitting over your situation right now. Your vindication has the same inevitability as the sunrise. Not if the witnesses speak, not if circumstances improve, not if the people who have been silent finally decide to cooperate. The dawn comes regardless. The witnesses are the instrument, but God is the law that guarantees the dawn. And laws are not broken by human preference. But here is what I need you to understand about how the dawn works, because this is the piece most people miss, and missing it is the reason so many people give up right before the full sunrise. The dawn does not happen all at once. The night does not simply surrender. The darkness does not instantly collapse. It begins with something almost imperceptible, a thin line of color at the horizon, something so subtle you almost wonder if you're imagining it. A moment right at the edge of the darkness, where the light is so faint and so fragile that the night still looks like it might hold. That moment is almost unbearable, because you are not sure. You have been in the dark long enough that you have trained yourself not to hope too quickly. And so when the light first appears, small and uncertain at the horizon, everything in you wants to dismiss it, to protect yourself, to not get your hopes up again. But the thin line is not a possibility. It is the first moment of an inevitable sunrise. And once the light begins at the horizon, it does not stop. It spreads, slowly at first, then faster, then undeniably, until the darkness has nowhere left to go. The witness who just broke, the one who finally spoke, is the thin line of light at the horizon of your situation. You may not see the full sunrise yet. The vindication may not be visible to everyone around you yet. The full truth may not yet be public. The people who built the false narrative may not yet have been confronted with what is coming. But the light has begun. And what the law of the dawn guarantees is this: what began at the horizon will not stay at the horizon. It is already spreading, in places you cannot see yet, in conversations you are not part of, in the conscience of the second witness, in the decisions being made about your situation right now. The crack is the beginning, and what begins does not stop. Here is what I need you to hold on to when you cannot see the light yet. The crack happened, whether you can observe it or not, whether it has reached you yet or not, whether you have received any evidence of it or not. The witness broke, and the breaking is not contingent on your awareness of it. It does not need you to observe it to be real. It does not require your confirmation to be valid. It happened. And the law that governs all hidden things has been applied to your situation. Chosen one, here is the hardest part of this season. It is the gap between the first crack of light and the full sunrise, the gap between the witness breaking and the vindication becoming visible. That gap, short or long, is the most disorienting space in any waiting season, because in that gap, nothing looks different from the outside. The people who built the false narrative are still living as if nothing has changed. The silence in your social circle is still there. The weight you have been carrying is still there. And yet something fundamental has shifted. The crack happened. And what you need in the gap, what will carry you from the first crack to the full sunrise, is not more evidence. It is the knowledge that the law is already working, that the spread has already begun, in conversations you are not part of, in decisions being made about your situation that have not reached you, in the conscience of the second witness who is watching what the first one did. The law does not need your surveillance to operate. It does not ask you to monitor the progress. It asks you to hold your position while the light does what light does: spread until the darkness has nowhere left to stand. And your assignment in the gap, the space between the crack and the full sunrise, is not what you might expect. It is not to go looking for evidence of what has been set in motion. It is not to accelerate the dawn by forcing conversations. It is not to contact the witnesses and ask what they said. It is not to re-enter the narrative and try to manage the outcome. Your assignment is one thing: hold your position while the light spreads. Chosen one. Do you know what every dawn requires? Someone who was standing before it arrived. Not someone who ran toward the horizon to pull the sun up. Not someone who forced the darkness to cooperate. Not someone who managed the transition from night to morning. Someone who simply was there, standing in the last moments of the dark, with the settled certainty, not a desperate hope, the settled certainty that the morning was not a question, That is what you have been doing. Every day you chose trust over reaction. Every day you stayed quiet when the urge to speak was overwhelming. Every day you released the outcome back to God instead of picking it up and running with it. You were standing in position, waiting for a dawn you could not yet see. And what you carried through the waiting, the faithfulness, the trust, the silence, is not just something you survived. It is what qualifies you to receive the full noonday sun. Because the person who held position through the dark is the person who is still standing when the light arrives. You did not wait in vain. You waited in position, and the dawn you've been waiting for has begun. Chosen one. What is happening in your situation is not new. God has done this before. Exactly this. And I want you to look at the most famous vindication story in all of Scripture. Not as a distant historical event, but as a blueprint for what is already happening in your life right now. Joseph, his brothers threw him in a pit, sold him to strangers, told their father he was dead. And the people who were present, the brothers who knew what actually happened, chose silence. For years, Joseph went to Potiphar's house, then to prison, then to a deeper prison when Potiphar's wife constructed a false narrative about him. And through every single layer of injustice, Joseph did not manage the exposure of the truth. He did not build a case. He did not contact his brothers and demand they confess. He did not force the vindication to come faster than it was coming. He stayed positioned. He served with integrity in Potiphar's house. He served with integrity in the prison. He interpreted the dreams God gave him. And then he waited. And when the appointed moment arrived, when Pharaoh had a dream that no one could interpret, a witness remembered, a single cupbearer, a person who had been present when Joseph demonstrated something that could not be explained. And that witness broke his silence. And within 24 hours, Joseph went from the prison to the palace. Not slowly, not gradually, not in proportion to how long the injustice had lasted, in one day. Chosen one, your Joseph moment is already in motion. The witness has broken. The cupbearer has spoken. And what happens next does not have to take as long as what came before. Isaiah chapter 62 verse 1. This is God speaking, not a prophet relaying a message, not a servant passing along second-hand information, God himself, first person, unmediated. He says this, "For Zion's sake I will not keep silent. For Jerusalem's sake I will not be quiet, until her righteousness goes forth as brightness, and her salvation as a burning torch." Let me translate that into the language of your season. For your sake. For the sake of the one who has been carrying the weight of an unjust silence. I will not keep silent. I will not be quiet. Not about you. Not about your situation. Not about the truth of what happened. Not until what is true about you goes forth as brightness. Not until your righteousness, the actual truth of who you are and what you did and what was done to you, becomes as visible and as undeniable as a burning torch in the middle of the darkest night. Chosen one. God did not promise to whisper your vindication. He promised to burn it into visibility. The brightness he's describing is not subtle. The burning torch is not a question. He is not saying he will gently nudge circumstances until the truth softly emerges. He is saying he will not stop. He will not be quiet until the righteousness that belongs to you is so visible it cannot be ignored. And here is how God keeps that commitment without bypassing human free will. He moves them from the inside. He creates conditions in the conscience of the witnesses that make their own silence unbearable. He whispers to them in their comfortable moments. He speaks to them through their conscience. He shouts at them through their own pain and restlessness until the silence becomes heavier than speaking. And then they break. And God's refusal to be quiet about your righteousness sounds exactly like a human being finally telling the truth. The person who broke the silence, the witness who finally spoke, did not arrive at that decision randomly. They were moved, not in a mystical sense that removes their agency, moved from the inside, stirred. Over a period of time that you may never fully know about, God was working on the internal conditions of that witness, maybe through a quiet conviction that would not leave them alone, a memory of what they saw that kept surfacing at inconvenient moments, a discomfort every time they told the version of the story that left out the truth, maybe through a circumstance in their own life that forced them to reckon with the cost of silence, a moment where their own integrity was on the line, a moment where they needed someone to tell the truth about them and felt the weight of having withheld truth about you, maybe through pain. The same megaphone Lewis described, God shouting through something difficult in the witness's own life, rousing something that had been sleeping, activating the conscience that had been deferred, and the discomfort grew, and the memory would not quiet down, and the peace they needed began to require something they had been refusing to give, until this morning, when the silence became more costly than the speaking, and they broke. Chosen one, this is God refusing to be quiet about your righteousness. It does not come with dramatic announcement. It does not arrive with a soundtrack. It does not look like divine intervention from the outside. It looks like a person waking up and deciding they can no longer stay silent. But from the inside of heaven's economy, from the vantage point of the God who said, "I will not be quiet until her righteousness shines like a burning torch," it is the answer to that promise, arriving exactly on schedule. And now I want to answer the question you have probably been carrying for most of this season, the one you may not have even voiced out loud because it felt dangerous to ask. Why is it taking so long? If God was always going to move the witnesses, why did he wait until now? Here is the answer. And it is not the answer most people expect. God was not only preparing the witnesses, he was preparing you, chosen one. The version of you sitting with this message right now is not the same version that entered the silent season. Something happened to you in the waiting, something that could not have been produced any other way, not by a leadership course, not by a mentor, not by a season of blessing and open doors and visible favor, only by this, the specific depth of trust that comes from holding on to God when the evidence suggests he has abandoned you, the specific groundedness that comes from keeping your integrity when no one is watching and no one is rewarding it, the specific authority that comes from staying positioned when everything in your environment is telling you to move. You are not the same. And the truth being released now into this version of you lands differently than it would have landed a year ago. A year ago, you might have received the vindication and used it to defend yourself to the people who doubted you. Today, you receive it as confirmation of what you already know, that God was faithful, that the waiting had purpose, that the silence was not abandonment. The timing is not an accident. The timing is the message. God prepared you for the weight of what he is about to release. Chosen one, before we go to the final section, I need you to do something, not for me, for yourself. Type, "I am staying" in the comments right now. 2 words, I am staying. It is not just a comment, it is a declaration. It is you saying out loud to yourself, to the enemy who has been hoping you would break, to the God who has been watching you hold position, that you are not done, that you are not moving, that you have chosen to trust the law of the dawn over the evidence of the night. Type it, I am staying. And if you have a person in your life, who has been carrying what you have been carrying, someone who has been waiting for a truth to surface, holding an injustice alone, staying quiet when the urge to react has been overwhelming. Share this message with them right now, not later. They need to hear that the witnesses are not permanent, that the law is already working, that the crack has already begun, even if they cannot see it yet. You were brought here by divine appointment, and maybe, just maybe, God brought you here so you could bring someone else. Share it. Stay with me. Because what comes next is the moment where everything we have established today becomes a declaration over your life. Hold on. Because the climax of this message and the climax of your season is directly ahead. Stay with me. Because what I am about to show you in the next few minutes is the most specific and most powerful part of this entire message. This is where what God has been doing in your situation becomes undeniable. Matthew chapter 18 verse 16. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. God built a legal threshold into his own system, not a general principle about fairness, not a suggestion about gathering community input. A threshold, a specific number, a minimum below which a matter cannot be established, and above which it cannot be denied. 2 witnesses, that is the number, not 10. Not a majority vote, not an investigation commissioned by an institution that has the power to compel testimony. 2 people who saw, 2 people who know, 2 people whose testimony establishes the truth with the weight of divine law. And chosen one, your situation has exactly 2, not 1 more than necessary, not 1 fewer, 2. Not because you arranged them, not because you identified them and cultivated their awareness of what they knew, not because you petitioned God to preserve their testimony, because God did that. He preserved them. He held their knowledge intact over the length of the entire silent season. He protected the memory from erosion or revision. He worked on their conscience, quietly, persistently, over months and years, creating the internal conditions for exactly this moment. And now, the threshold that God himself established as sufficient to settle any matter in heaven and on earth, that threshold has been met. The case about your life is not in process. It has been decided. The investigation of your integrity is not ongoing. It is complete. The truth about what was done and what was said and what was taken, it has been established. In the court that matters more than any court on earth. In the record that outlasts any human record. In the economy of heaven where God himself serves as the judge who cannot be corrupted or deceived or pressured into silence, the case has been established. And what God establishes cannot be permanently suppressed. Not by power, not by money, not by the coordinated silence of every person who prefers the false narrative. The threshold has been met. Heaven has ruled. And what is established in heaven becomes visible on earth. The 2 witnesses God preserved are not the beginning of a process. They are the completion of one. Do you understand what that means? It means the process that was required to establish your case is finished. The gathering of testimony, done. The preservation of evidence, done. The alignment of witnesses whose accounts confirm one another, done. The divine legal threshold, met. Heaven has ruled on your situation. And what heaven establishes, hear this clearly, no human decision can permanently suppress. No false narrative can permanently overwrite what has been written in a record that human hands cannot reach. No agreement of silence can permanently bury what has been registered in a court where the judge sees and knows everything. No amount of power or money or social influence or institutional protection can permanently overwrite a verdict delivered in the courts of heaven. Chosen one. The people who built the narrative against you may not know this yet. They may be living as if the silence is permanent, as if what was buried will stay buried, as if the witnesses they believe they have contained will remain silent. But they are operating with incomplete information. They do not know what you now know. They do not know the threshold has been met. They do not know the case has been established. They do not know that one of the witnesses just broke. They are still managing a narrative that has already been undone in the court that matters. The verdict has been issued. The release of that verdict onto the visible stage of your life is not contingent on their cooperation. Not if, when, and when is approaching. And here is something I need you to understand about what happens when the first witness breaks. It is not just the first witness who hears about it. The second witness hears too. The second person who has been holding their knowledge, who has been carrying the weight of what they saw and what they know. They just received information they did not have yesterday. They found out that one of the other witnesses spoke, and that changes everything, because the second witness has been operating under the assumption that the silence was universal, that no one else was willing to speak. That speaking would cost them something that no one else was paying. But now they know that is not true. Now they know the silence has been broken. Now they know that what they were protecting, the comfortable anonymity of staying quiet, has already been surrendered by someone else. And the calculus changes. The internal conversation that the second witness is now having, right now, in real time, while you are sitting with this message, is not the same conversation it was yesterday. Yesterday the question was, am I willing to be the only one who speaks? Today the question is, knowing that the first witness has already spoken, am I willing to be the last one who stays silent? Those are very different questions. And the second question is much harder to answer with silence. Chosen one. The threshold in Matthew 18 required 2 witnesses. The first has broken. The second is watching. And the momentum created by the first is working on the second right now. The chain has started. And chains, once they start moving, are very difficult to stop. Chosen one. Before we declare everything that is true about your situation right now, I need to prepare you for one thing. Not to frighten you, to protect you from the one move that would cost you everything in the final mile, because this is where it gets personal and precise. The moment right before the established case becomes visible, the moment right before the first crack of dawn becomes an undeniable sunrise, is the most dangerous moment in any waiting season. Not because the breakthrough is not coming. It is coming. The threshold has been met. The case has been established. The witnesses are already speaking. The law of the dawn is already spreading. But it does not feel like it is coming. And that is the danger. Right before a breakthrough, in the hours and days immediately preceding the moment when everything changes, the environment often looks exactly like it did in the middle of the silent season. There is no dramatic shift in the visible circumstances. There is no audible confirmation from heaven. There is no external evidence that the dam is about to break. There is just more of the same silence, the same unresolved tension, the same fatigue of carrying what you have been carrying for longer than you planned. And in that moment, the fatigue catches people who have been faithful for a very long time. They simply stop. They re-enter the conversations God asked them to step out of. They pick up the narrative management they had finally put down. They make the move that changes their position right before the position was about to pay off. Chosen one. I am telling you this not to frighten you. I am telling you this because you are in the final mile. And the final mile is the one where people give up. Do not give up. And C.S. Lewis, writing in Mere Christianity, arrived at the precise description of what this moment requires of you. He wrote this: "Faith is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted, in spite of your changing moods." Long pause. Read that definition carefully. He does not define faith as certainty. He does not define faith as the absence of doubt. He does not define faith as the feeling that everything is going to work out. He defines faith as an art, something that requires practice, something that requires skill, something that has to be actively exercised in the moment when your mood is working against you. Your reason has accepted certain things about your situation. Your reason knows what happened. Your reason knows what was done and what was said and what was taken. Your reason accepted, at some point in this season, that God was present, that the law of hidden things was real, that the dawn was coming, that the waiting had purpose, that the silence was preparation and not abandonment. Your reason accepted those things, but your moods have been cycling: tired, hopeful, discouraged, angry, peaceful, exhausted, hopeful again. And Lewis is saying that faith is not the absence of that cycling. Faith is the art of holding on to what your reason accepted, even when your mood is telling you to let go, even when the fatigue says it is not worth it, even when the silence says nothing is happening, even when the length of the season says God forgot. This is that moment, the moment where faith becomes art. Hold on. This is the final mile. Hold on. Let me tell you everything that is true about your situation right now. The crack has happened. The witness has broken. The law of hidden things is working. The dawn has begun. God has refused to stay silent. The divine legal threshold has been met. The case has been established in heaven. Everything that needs to be in motion is in motion. Not eventually. Not when you do something else. Not when circumstances align more favorably. Right now. While you are sitting with this message, right now, it is in motion. And your assignment, the only assignment you have been given for this moment, is this: hold. Not to fight the people who built the narrative, not to explain yourself to anyone who does not yet know the full truth, not to defend yourself in the conversations that are happening without you, not to manage the outcome or control the timeline or force the process to move faster than it is already moving. Hold. Stay in the position of trust that you have been holding. Let the Lord do what the Lord does. Let the dawn spread the way dawn spreads. Let God refuse to stay silent in His way and in His timing. Chosen one, you have been in training for this final mile, for the entire length of the season. Every day, you chose trust over reaction. You were building the muscle for this. Every day, you stayed quiet when you wanted to speak. You were practicing the hold. Every day, you released the outcome back to God instead of picking it up. You were rehearsing the posture of this moment. This is the moment the training was for. Hold on. The morning is breaking. Hold on. Let me tell you what happens after the crack. Because the breaking of the first witness is not the conclusion. It is the opening of a chapter. The restoration chapter. The crack is the first domino. And once it falls, what follows is not a slow drip. It is a sequence. One witness breaking creates the conditions for another. Because now, the second witness knows they are not the only one who knows the truth. Now they know speaking is possible. Now they know the silence they were holding was not universal. And one person choosing to speak creates safety for the next. One truth surfacing exposes the false narrative's fragility, and the lie that was covering 10 other truths begins to shake. The narrative that felt permanent, that felt so solid and established that challenging it seemed impossible, starts to crack in places you did not even know were weak. Not slowly, with acceleration. Chosen one, what has felt impossible for years is about to start happening faster than you have capacity to process. Doors that felt permanently locked will open. Conversations that felt permanently forbidden will happen. People who chose silence for the sake of their own comfort will find that the silence is no longer sustainable, and the sequence, once it begins, does not stop at one domino. It runs the entire length of the structure until everything that was built on the false foundation has fallen, and what stands in the aftermath is only what was true. Before I tell you what comes after the crack, I want to tell you something about who you are now, because the version of you that is emerging from this season is not the same version that entered it, and the difference matters. The person who entered the silent season, the person who first encountered the injustice and the false narrative and the silence of the witnesses, was capable, gifted, purposeful, chosen. But there were some things that person had not yet learned that could not be learned any other way than through what you just went through. You learned how to trust without evidence, not the easy version where you trust God when things are going well and the evidence supports the faith. The hard version where you trust when there is no evidence, where you choose faith on a Tuesday morning, when nothing has changed and nothing looks different and the silence is still there. That is a capacity you did not have before this season. You learned how to hold your position under sustained pressure, not for a week, not for a month, for the full length of however long this has lasted. And that kind of endurance, the kind that does not break under sustained, unrelenting pressure, is not given. It is forged by exactly this. And you learned what you are made of. You found out that you are the kind of person who does not break when the injustice is real and the silence is extended and the vindication is invisible. That is not a small thing. That is the foundation of everything God is about to build. The platform He's releasing your vindication onto is a platform that requires someone who's been formed by exactly what you just came through. You are that person now, in a way you were not before. Jeremiah 29 verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Chosen one, I want you to understand something about that verse that most people miss. It was written to a people in exile, not to people living in comfort, not to people for whom things were going well, to a people who had lost almost everything, who had been displaced from their home, who were living under the weight of an extended season of injustice and confusion and unanswered questions. And God speaks into that situation, into the exile. And He says, I know the plans I have for you. Not, I hope things work out. Not, I am sorry for what happened. Not, the plans I had were disrupted. But I am working on a revision. I know the plans. Present tense, active, deliberate, already known and already in motion. The injustice you have been walking through was never the plan. It was a chapter, and chapters end. What God designed for your life, before the false narrative was constructed, before the witnesses chose silence, before the season of injustice began, that plan was not cancelled. The injustice did not rewrite the blueprint, it delayed the construction. And what the crack is doing right now, the witness breaking, the truth surfacing, the dawn beginning to spread, is not just the end of the delay, it is the door opening to the future that was planned before any of this began. The hope God promised is not that you will survive what was done to you. The hope is that what comes after will be so full and so real that the season you are emerging from will become the backstory of the greatest chapter of your life. That door is opening. Walk toward it. Let us pray together. And I want this prayer to be more than a ritual. I want it to be the moment you formally receive what God has been working on while you waited. Pray this with me. Lord, I receive today what your investigation has already established. The witnesses you preserved. I did not arrange them. I did not find them. I did not earn them. You preserved them. The truth you protected through every attempt to bury it, to revise it, to silence the people who knew it. You held it. The crack you orchestrated, the breaking that just happened. I receive it as evidence of your faithfulness. Not my effort, not my prayers being answered because I prayed them correctly. Your faithfulness operating on the schedule you set before the season began. I release the need to manage what you are already managing. I let go of the impulse to step in and accelerate what is already moving. I let go of the temptation to re-enter the conversations that you asked me to step out of. I let go of the burden of defending what you have already established. I declare that nothing hidden about my situation will stay hidden. What you have established in the courts of heaven, let it become visible on the earth. What the witnesses have begun to speak, let it spread until the full truth is known by the people who need to know it. And the future you planned before the injustice, before the false narrative, before the season of silence. Let that door open wide. I am walking toward it. I trust you. I thank you. I receive what is already on the way to me. Long pause. Amen. I want you to leave this message carrying something specific, not just information, not just a better understanding of your situation, a peace, a particular kind of peace that is different from the peace that comes when circumstances improve. It is the peace that comes from knowing that what God has established cannot be undone, that the witnesses were always there, even when you had no evidence of them, that the crack was always coming, even when the night felt like it might be permanent, that the law of hidden things was always in effect, even when the false narrative felt unstoppable, that God's refusal to stay silent was always true, even when the silence around your situation was deafening, and that you arrived here at this message, at this moment, not accidentally, by appointment, divine appointment. At the exact moment the crack began, carry that, not just tonight, tomorrow morning when nothing looks visibly different, the day after, when the sequence is still developing in places you cannot see. Every day that remains between the first crack of light and the full undeniable sunrise. The peace does not depend on seeing the full sunrise. The peace is rooted in knowing the light has begun, and what begins does not stop. Carry that into your ordinary days. Let it be the settled thing underneath everything else you carry. The light has begun, chosen one. Your assignment right now is one word: stay. Do not move from the position of trust you have been holding. Do not re-enter the conversations God asked you to step out of. Do not contact the witnesses to ask what they said or to whom they said it. Do not try to accelerate what is already in motion by forcing explanations or demanding that the process move on your timeline. Do not break the silence you have been holding just because the first crack of dawn has appeared. The crack happened. The witnesses are speaking. God has refused to stay silent. The divine legal threshold has been met. The case has been established. The sequence is in motion. The dawn is spreading. Everything that needs to be happening is already happening. Your job is to stay in position. The position of trust you have held through the entire length of this season, and receive what is already moving toward you. The breakthrough is not something you manufacture. It is something you receive. And you receive it by being in the same position when it arrives that you were in when it began. Stay. Do not move. The morning is coming. and it is coming to find you exactly where you have been. If this message found you tonight, if this message found you in the middle of an ordinary day, in the quiet of a sleepless night, in a moment between carrying everything you have been carrying, it found you because God arranged it, not the algorithm, not a random click, not coincidence. Divine appointment. At the exact moment the crack began in your situation. And if God arranged for you to find this message at this moment, He will arrange for you to find the next one when you need it. Subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications. Not just so you do not miss the next video, so that when the next word comes, the word you will need for the specific moment of the specific day when the next part of the sequence arrives in your life, it finds you. This community was built for people exactly like you. People who are staying in position while God works. People who have chosen trust over reaction in a season when reaction would have been completely understandable. People who understand that the witnesses were always there, even when they could not be seen. People who are staying. You belong here. Subscribe. Stay. And when you see someone in your life who is carrying what you have been carrying, share this with them, because God may have brought you here tonight so you could bring them here tomorrow. The crack has happened. The witness has broken. The law is working. The dawn has begun. The case has been established. The sequence is in motion. And what God is releasing on your behalf, through the witnesses He preserved, through the law He built into the foundation of reality, through the divine threshold that has been met, through the faithfulness you have been holding through the longest nights of this season, it is going to be worth every day, every single day, every day of carrying what did not belong to you, every day of staying quiet when the urge to speak was overwhelming, every day of trusting a God who felt silent in a season when you needed Him loudest. Every day will be redeemed by what is coming, not because suffering deserves reward, but because the God who allowed the season is the same God who planned the morning. And He does not plan mornings that are not worth the night. Stay, chosen one. The morning is coming, and when it comes, you will understand why the night lasted exactly as long as it did. Not a day more than necessary, not a moment longer than the formation required, exactly as long as it needed to be, to produce exactly the version of you who is ready to step into exactly the future He planned. The morning is coming. Hold on. God sees you. He has seen every day. And what He is about to do on your behalf will be worth every single one of them.